So what we are hoping to get from this workshop and to get from the conversation with all of you in presenting what would otherwise be a topic that is never found in this type of space is to think about how we are all complicit in the oppression of many peoples around the world, but that doesn't have to be the case. We can also think about how we can join in the resistance and in the defiance of multiple targets of death around the world. And so a question that we want to ask ourselves and that we want to ask all of you is, how are you resisting these systems? Because again, colonization looks very much the same in similar patterns, and it also takes its various forms in terms of white supremacy, capitalism, and the way that cheap labor is exploited, the way that cultural appropriation continues to demean certain communities and certain cultures around the world, the way that patriarchy and male supremacy also includes a feminist, it must include a feminist critique to the ways that many communities have experienced trauma, and the way that ecocide continues to destroy native lands and native resources around the world. We have to think about resistance to this very intricate web of violence. And so in doing so, we're hoping that we can think about the many movements and the many communities that are very much shouting for their lives to be just as meaningful as those that are deciding the policies that are targeting them and their cultures and their languages and their foods and their lands and their waters for that death and for that destruction. Here are just very, very few examples of what is happening right now, today, probably right now, organizing within communities that are looking for solidarity from a lot of us in this room. There are Indigenous Hawaiians who are continuously fighting against the building of the TMT telescope on their volcano Mauna Kea. There are Native folks in the indigenous lands on occupied United States indigenous territories that are fighting against pipelines, just as much there are Sami communities in Northern Europe and Finland and Norway resisting the Arctic Railway, and as well as Israeli settler colonial land, water, air theft on Palestinian land. So we have to think about, what does it mean for me, for us, for the people in this room to be in solidarity with communities that are fighting for their lives? We have to think about what colonialism looks like and how it's related to us so we can fight it, so that we can fight it together, because there are people suffering, again, right now, because most of us are in this workshop not fighting that struggle. So we have to see, what does it mean for us as scientists to use a tool like decolonial feminist science to fight for life? Again, we cannot be within the illusion of objectivity or neutrality, or that it doesn't matter that we shouldn't become involved in politics. We actually have to see that science has been political all along, has been determined and positioned in a place of power that has determined its politics and who it fights for and whose voice is in the room. So we're saying, please think about the colonial feminist science that is in service of those that are suffering, of those that are fighting for their life and dignity and their lands. And so our call to defiance for all of us in this room is to see our reflection, to reflect on our positionalities, to recognize our points of power and privilege, and for some of us in this room, our oppressions. How are we motivated, and can we be motivated for a sense of justice that is in solidarity with peoples, and potentially using our science, and potentially being in solidarity and becoming in solidarity with each of us in this room as a place and as a method for decolonization, so that we can have a goal of dignity and life for all and not just for some, which has been, in one of the chats, the question was, what is the benefit of colonialism? The benefit of colonialism has very, very much directly tied to the human dignity that has been aligned with only some, with only the colonizers, with only those that are considered men, with only those that are considered white and European, with only those that are considered able-bodied, with only those that are considered having a passport that can cross borders, but others can't. We have to think about life and dignity for all. And so in order to do that, we want to bring up an example of a story of those that are fighting right now on the ground for life, for waters and against climate change through the voice and through the poetry of Cassie Jetnell Kitchener, who is a Pacific Marshall Islands activist against nuclear and climate change. And she wrote this poem, it's very beautiful, for her daughter in order to think about becoming motivated for a life of dignity and not a life of death. And so I'm going to share this short video clip, and then we'll get into a discussion amongst all of us.
Our next speaker was selected from more than 500 candidates. Dear Mata Filipinas, you are a 7-month-old sunrise of gummy smiles. You are bald as an egg and bald as a Buddha. Your thighs that are thunder, shrieks that are lightning, so excited for bananas, hugs, and our morning walks along the lagoon. Dear Mata Filipino, I want to tell you about that lagoon, that lucid, sleepy lagoon lounging against the sunrise. Men say that one day that lagoon will devour you. They say it will gnaw at the shoreline, chew at the roots of your breadfruit trees, gulp down rows of your seawalls, and crunch through your island's shattered bones. They say you, your daughter, and your granddaughter too, will wander rootless, with only a passport to call home. Dear Mata Filipino, don't cry. Mommy promises, no one will come and devour you. No greedy whale of a company sharking through political seas. No backwater bullying of businesses with broken morals. No blindfolded bureaucracies gonna push this mother ocean over the edge. No one's drowning, baby. No one's moving. No one's losing their homeland. No one's gonna become a climate change refugee. Or should I say, no one else. To the Carteret Islanders of Papua New Guinea, and to the Taro Islanders of Fiji, I take this moment to apologize to you. We are drawing the line here because, baby, we are going to fight. Your mommy, daddy, boo-boo, Dimma, your country, and your president too, we will all fight. And even though there are those hidden behind platinum titles who like to pretend that we don't exist, that the Marshall Islands, Tuvalu, Kiribati, Maldives, and Typhoon Haiyan in the Philippines, and floods of Pakistan, Algeria, and Colombia, and hurricanes, tidal waves, and earthquakes didn't exist, still, there are those who see us, hands reaching out, fists raising up, banners unfurling, megaphones booming, and we are canoes blocking bullshit. We are the radiance of solar villages. We are the rich, clean soil of the farmer's path. We are petitions blooming from teenage fingertips. We're families, biking, recycling, reusing, engineers, dreaming, designing, building, artists, painting, dancing, writing. We're spreading the word. And there are thousands out on the streets, marching with signs, hand in hand, chanting for change now. I'm marching for you, baby. I'm marching for us. Because we deserve to do more than just survive. We deserve to thrive. Dear Mata Philippines, your eyes heavy with drowsy sleep. So just close those eyes and sleep in peace. Because we won't let you down. You'll see.
So for our final discussion, we want to point out that we would like to think about how we can help each other bring resistance to our work. And for a lot of us who are already doing this work, we know that we are not going to get gold stars for this work. We might even face resistance for doing this work. We might not get publishings from this work. We might even be targeted to be fired for this work, but it's important because people's lives are at stake. So how can we find solidarity within each other in this room to help this be the work that is important, that matters? And so we also want to ask, what does resistance look like in your life? What has been your journey that you can share with us? And also, are there resistance movements like decolonial, anti-colonial, feminist, anti-racist, queer, lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, queer struggles that you're involved with right now that we can also be in solidarity with you in? We have about 10 minutes for us to discuss, and we are asking all of you to unmute yourselves if you would like to speak when we call on you. And so in order for us to call on you, please type in the chat stack so that we keep an order of who's speaking first and who's speaking next. And you will have 1 minute to speak. So if you want to speak right now, please type stack in the chat. If you don't want to speak but still want to share an answer to one of the questions, please type it out in the chat like you all have been doing so far so that we can read your contributions to this very important discussion, if not one of the most important life-death discussions that we can have. So yeah, take a moment right now to type stack if you would like to speak, and we will call on you and you can unmute yourselves then. Or just type your answer and we can also read it. So take a moment right now.
As folks are typing in their messages, I just wanted to bring out some of the things that people have been discussing from sort of the past question prompts and then leading into this one. One of them was about how research has been positively impacted due to colonialism, and talking about conservation and conservation and resources and whatnot. And so I'd like to bring up some of the points that other folks made in I don't know if it was in response to that, but in other points about this idea of conservation. So one person pointed out that in ecology, colonialism has shaped how natural conservation should look. We see mostly natural parks devoid of human presence, and instead of as a space where humans and nature interact. And so in nature conservation, the goal is to achieve a status similar to those where humans are not present, the quote-unquote natural world, a view that is not normally shared by Indigenous peoples. And so something that we've seen in the creation of the national park system in the United States that regulates public use of the Grand Canyon and Yosemite and Yellowstone, and has displaced Indigenous peoples that that originally lived on that land and lived there for thousands of years. There's another perspective from Puerto Rico, talking about sites that were used for bomb testing and have now been turned into conservation areas just to avoid the obligation of cleaning up the contamination from that bomb testing. There's an example from I am not entirely from Sundarbans, the mangrove forests. It's like other swamps or wastelands. It's also considered, or wetlands. It's also considered a wasteland. Has been heavily deforested by the British to create habitable land in an otherwise "quote unquote" hopeless place. But the Indian government has used colonial forms of conservation to dump people out of land to conserve forests, "quote unquote" conserve forests and tigers at the expense of people. So those were some of the points around conservation that I saw coming up.
One of the comments as well that I see on the chat here is someone points to the fact that it's important to also not see ourselves as victims all the time, but as free individuals that have the right to make our own decisions. And I think that's extremely key and part of the reason why we decided to end with a video of a Marshall Islander woman, right, to bring back that agency within the story, right, of nuclear bomb testing and everything that Pacific Islanders have survived, right, to see that never, even so with that history, a lot of folks, a lot of Indigenous folks, a lot of small communities, people of color all around the world are taking agency and have that agency to fight for themselves and propose the solutions and directions in which we want our own communities to go. So I just wanted to also point that out as a good key point.
Beatriz also has a really good comment around colonial science still being a pressing topic in the field, and I think that's really key for what it means to intervene or to even think about changing the structure of our fields. And it's important to note that we can't do this alone, so it's important to find other people who have the similar critiques that we have so that we can join together and form a front to intervening, right, in these structures. So that's a really good point, in that if we see the problem, then let's talk about it, right? So this is the space that we can find each other in forming these fronts. So thank you, Beatriz, for sharing that.
And somebody gave an example in the field of anthropology that came from white upper-class Westerners who were going to explore unfamiliar to them people and cultures and try to place them on different, on this evolutionary scale. And then the field went through a period of reflectiveness and has become more accepting of criticism, sort of self-criticism and self-reflection. So that's, exciting to see and hear. There's been a comment too about, networking and this kind of thing. And I think actually one of the things that, is unique and interesting about SPEECH is that it's a group of scientists, but also artists and activists and scholars in the field of ethnic studies and things like that. And sometimes you may be wondering how to, really do these kinds of investigations for yourself in the places you work. And many times, the answer is to start drawing on connections that you can make and relationships that you can build with other people who are around you, who may be ethnic studies scholars or activists in your community and these kinds of things. So actually, we can't expect to bring all of the information and all of the knowledge to the table on our own. And we'll be much better off if we build really good networks with the people around us.
If folks are interested in continuing some sort of connection amongst each other in order to continue talking, but to continue building even some of the work that folks haven't been able to name in the chat and that are a part of or that you know of, please feel free to send us an email to our Gmail, siege.sandiego@gmail.com. Connect with us on Instagram, Facebook, and we can keep a conversation going, particularly for the folks in this room. We could potentially form a separate thread amongst all of us that want to continue connecting and building and potentially helping each other out in our projects for resistance. I think this is our time. Correct?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Sorry. Yes.
Thank you everyone so much for engaging with us. In solidarity with all of you that are resisting, and for those that have yet to resist, we welcome you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for actually prompting me to that the session is ending. I was just as immersed in it as I'm sure everyone is here. This truly has been fascinating, and there's just so much more to process. But I think it's been a wonderful session, and thank you so much, Emma, Jessica, Marlene, and Leslie for doing this session with us, and just all the comments and chats. And I do think it's something we can keep on continuing, perhaps in the, for now in the discussion sessions in Cuba, but continue outside this as